Hi, beautiful people. Welcome to the Fort Salem Library, where we read you your fanfiction. So sit down or don't, relax or don't, and enjoy these stories in a way you have not before. We at Fort Salem Library do not own Motherland Fort Salem or any of the related characters. The Motherland Fort Salem series is created by Elliot Lawrence and owned by Freeform. This story is a work of fanfiction and is meant for entertainment only. We are not making any profit from these stories. All rights of the original Motherland Fort Salem story belong to Freeform. We also do not own Who Has to Know or any of its original characters and storylines. We did, however, get permission from the author to read their story. This story was created and written by TrueFreak89, and you can find a link in our show notes. This story is being read to you by Britt. Who Has to Know? Chapter 6. Scylla pulled up in Porter's car outside the address Raelle had given her the night before. Porter had spent the night like Scylla expected, and he and Byron were camped out in the living room playing Xbox like they did most Saturdays. Scylla had told them she and Raelle had missed something off their project, and she needed to go by to finish it. Neither boy had questioned her, and Porter had been all too happy to give her his car keys rather than have to drive her over there. Scylla glanced at her reflection in the rearview mirror and fussed over her hair. She'd worn it down, and it hung in loose curls thanks to the braid she'd put in it the night before after her shower. Scylla was ready to go when her phone pinged. She looked at it expecting a snotty message from Raelle about being late. It was already well after 1 o'clock, but it was a text from Byron instead, telling her to play nice with Raelle. Scylla rolled her eyes and pocketed her phone in her jeans. She climbed out of the car and used the key fob to lock it behind her before trudging up to Collar's family driveway. Scylla wasn't sure what to expect when she knocked at the front door. She didn't know all that much about Raelle, never mind her family life. Someone came to the door after a few moments. It was an older blonde woman with kind eyes and a warm smile. There was no doubting she was Raelle's mother. "Hello, can I help you?" she asked, her southern session drawl much more pronounced than Raelle's. "Hi, I'm here to see Raelle." "Oh, well, come right on in then." Willa Collar didn't recognize her as one of Raelle's usual friends, but the older woman ushered the teenager inside anyway. "I'm Willa, Raelle's mama." "I'm Scylla," she introduced herself with a genuine smile. Unlike her daughter, Willa was easy to like and get along with. Scylla wondered where Raelle got her surliness from. "It's nice to meet you, Scylla. Are you a new friend of Raelle's?" Willa asked, the same piercing blue eyes she shared with her daughter fixed on Scylla. Was that the door?" Raelle appeared at the top of the stairs, interrupting her mother's friendly interrogation of the other girl. She was wearing sweatpants and another sleeveless shirt despite it being early fall. Scylla wasn't sure she'd ever seen Raelle wearing sleeves. The blonde's eyes widened as they landed on Scylla, standing in her house, and she rushed to the bottom of the stairs to rescue the other girl from her mom. She knew all too well how her mother could get around new girls in her life. "Scylla, hey." "Mom, this is Scylla. We're working on a school project together." Raelle tugged on Scylla's sleeve, beckoning her to follow her upstairs. "Okay, hun. Do you girls need anything? Something to drink, some snacks?" "We're good, Mama," Raelle called over her shoulder, practically dragging Scylla up the stairs away from her. She led Scylla to her room and closed the door behind them, hoping her mom wouldn't come up and try to play 20 questions with her guest. Scylla took in Raelle's room as she crossed a perch on the edge of her bed. The walls, what Scylla could see of them, were blue and covered in posters. The furniture was mismatched, and the room was pure, organized chaos, with trinkets and possessions cluttering the shelves. Raelle's desk was overflowing with books and papers. Scylla didn't know how she could work at it. Raelle watched Scylla's keen eye take in her surroundings. She'd spent the morning tidying up, picking up dirty clothes from the floor and shoving things out of sight under her bed and in her closet. She felt like her room was being appraised and judged by the other girl, whose own room had been pristine. Raelle bit the inside of her cheek and shoved her hands into the pockets of her sweatpants as she leaned back against her bedroom door. Then she remembered pushing Scylla up against her own bedroom door and took a step away from it. Raelle cleared her throat, catching Scylla's attention as she scrutinized the photos of Raelle and her friends pinned to the corkboard above her desk. "So, I know what you're going to say." Scylla cocked her head to the side, staring at her expectantly, and Raelle's lips felt dry. The other girl had a way of staring right through her. Raelle pressed on. Scylla had come here to talk, after all. What happened yesterday was a mistake, it shouldn't have happened, and it can't happen again. Scylla leaned back on her elbows on Raelle's bed, like she had been there a million times before. "Actually, that's the complete opposite of what I was going to say," she said, catching Raelle off guard. "Huh?" Raelle gawked at her, her mouth hanging open like a character in a cartoon. But you have a boyfriend, and we're not friends, Scylla." "I don't want to be your friend, Raelle." Scylla shrugged, her eyes still boring into Raelle's. "Porter is sweet and loving and kind, but he can't get me off, and he sure as hell would never screw me up against the door." Raelle rubbed at the back of her neck as she took another conscious step away from the bedroom door. None of this was making any sense. She'd spent the better part of last week worried she had taken advantage of the other girl, crossed some invisible line when they had both been drunk. She said as much to Scylla. Scylla chuckled mirthlessly. "You were more drunk than I was, Raelle. You didn't take advantage of me, and I enjoyed it," she admitted with a coy bite of her lip, and Raelle was sure it had to be Opposites Day or something. Either that, or she was in a coma and this was all some crazy head trauma-induced dream. Maybe she did fall into Abigail's pool and cracked her head open the other night. Because nothing had made much sense since then. Raelle's confusion must have shown on her face. Scylla gave a sigh. "I love Porter, I do. But he can't give me what I need." "But I can?" Raelle asked in disbelief. Scylla shifted, so she was leaning forward in Raelle's bed. She looked down at the floor as she wrung her hands together. "As much as it pains me to admit? Yes." "But Porter is my problem," Scylla cut her off. Raelle licked at her dry lips as she took an unconscious step towards the other girl. "What are you suggesting? Some kind of friends with benefit thing?" "Exactly." Scylla cocked her head to the side, trying to appear more confident than she actually felt. "So what do you think?" "I think we're not friends, Scylla." Raelle scoffed, a nervous laugh slipping past her lips. "We don't even like each other." "Fine." Scylla's eyes darkened as she stood up, her lips pressed into a tight line. "Forget it." She stalked towards the door, intending to storm out. But Raelle caught hold of her wrist. "Wait." Raelle held on to the other girl's wrist, her thumb tracing the inside of it while she bit down on her own lip, her eyes glued to Scylla's, searching them for any sign of this was all some big joke, that Scylla was going to laugh at her the moment she said yes. Raelle was wary, but she couldn't deny her attraction to the other girl. Scylla might have been an insufferable know-it-all, but she was undeniably beautiful, and they had always proved they were compatible sexually. "Fine," said Raelle. "Sex. No strings attached. But nobody finds out." "Who am I going to tell?" Scylla rolled her eyes. "My brother? Or his best friend Porter?" Raelle dropped the other girl's wrist with a scowl. Pretty or not, she was still insufferable. "This doesn't mean I like you," Raelle grumbled. "I don't like you either," Scylla shrugged. "It's just sex, filling a need, that's all." She sat back on Raelle's bed, making herself at home. "Okay, so how are we going to do this? Do we text each other when we want to hook up, or set a regular time?" Raelle was out of her depth. She'd done casual hookups before, but nothing like this. Scylla wasn't any more experienced, but she'd spent all of last night thinking about this, about how it might work and how to keep it just between the two of them. "We do whatever works for both of us," she shrugged, and then her expression turned coy as she shuffled back on Raelle's bed. "Does doing it while your parents are at home work for you?" Raelle's inside twisted as she felt a flutter in her stomach at the suggestion, and her eyes involuntarily darted to Scylla's full lips. Her hands ached to touch the other girl, to take the time to explore her body fully. Their previous encounters had been all too brief for Rael's liking. The thought of having Scylla here, in her room, and neither of them running straight off after was an intoxicating one. Rael didn't even care that her parents were downstairs. She walked over to her door and flicked the lock shut. "That depends," she said, some of her usual cockiness returning now that she knew where they stood. "Do you think you can keep quiet?" Scylla broke out in a smirk, her eyes lighting up with a playful mischievousness that Rael had never seen on her, as she reached up and tugged her shirt over her head, letting it drop on the floor. "I don't know. Do you think you can make me?" Rael's breath caught in the back of her throat as she stared at the newly exposed flesh and took in Scylla's generous curves. Her mouth watered and her fingers twitched at her side. Rael couldn't deny it. She liked this newfound side of Scylla Ramshorn. Rael crossed the room in a few quick steps and cupped Scylla's cheeks in her hands before crushing their mouths together. She climbed onto the bed, straddling Scylla's hips and pushing her onto her back. Scylla let out a surprised oomph, her eyes widening before they closed over and her hands found the hem of Rael's shirt. They slipped under the fabric, running along Rael's ribs and round to her back, pulling her in closer. Rael's mouth moved to kiss a trail down Scylla's neck, her teeth nipping playfully at the skin there. Scylla mewed under her, her hips bucking up against Rael's. Rael slipped her knee between the other girl's legs, giving her exactly what she wanted as nimble fingers slipped around behind Scylla and unhooked her bra. Scylla pushed the straps down from her shoulders, and Rael tossed the bra aside like it had offended her. She dipped her head, taking one of Scylla's newly exposed nipples into her mouth. She teased the other nipple into a hard nub, alternating between rolling it between her fingers and pinching it. Scylla was a lot more vocal than last time. She writhed under Rael's ministrations, gasping and moaning at how good the other girl's mouth felt on her skin. She pulled at Rael's hair, tangling her fingers in it and urging her to keep going. Scylla groaned as Rael's mouth abandoned her breasts, but her disappointment didn't last long as Rael shifted to tug her pants down, bringing them and her underwear down in one go. Scylla kicked both off from around her ankles and set up to kiss Rael again, reaching for her hand to bring it between her thighs. Rael kissed her back, but she pulled her hand free from Scylla's grasp. She had other plans in mind. Rael had spent all night fantasizing what Scylla might taste like, and she wasn't about to waste another minute before finding out. She bit down on Scylla's lip before pushing her back down. Scylla lay on her back staring up at the other girl, her eyes wide and her pupils blown. Her cheeks were flushed and her pulse was in her throat as she watched Rael move down her body to press a kiss to her stomach. She tensed, clenching her legs together. Rael sensed the other girl's unease and slowed down, pressing lingering kisses to her stomach and grazing her teeth over Scylla's hip bone. Scylla's legs turned to jelly as her muscles relaxed and she eased her thighs apart to give Rael access to where she really wanted to put her mouth. Scylla bit her lip and threw back her head to save herself the embarrassment of looking at Rael as the other girl dipped her eyes and took in the slick wetness that already coated the inside of her thighs. She was so turned on it was shameful, and Rael had barely even touched her yet. Rael took a sharp intake of breath as her eager mouth hovered over Scylla's mound. Her scent was intoxicating, and Rael forgot all about her dislike for the other girl as she dipped her mouth and ran her tongue through Scylla's slick folds. Scylla murmured something unintelligible, both hands tangling in Rael's hair and pushing her mouth closer. Rael obliged her, burying her nose and mouth in Scylla's folds and licking at her entrance with her tongue. Scylla gasped, arching her hips up to meet the confident strokes of Rael's tongue. It felt incredible. She struggled not to cry out too loudly as Rael's tongue circled her entrance before slipping it inside of her. One of her hands left Rael's hair as she reached above her head and grasped at a pillow before pulling it over her face to stifle her moans. She was already so close, so when Rael moved her mouth to lick and suck at Scylla's swollen and throbbing clit, It sent her teetering over the edge. Her body stiffened, and she cried out into the pillow as she came, her walls clenching down on nothing. Raelle kept going, milking Scylla's orgasm for all it was worth, until the other girl pushed her head away and clenched her legs shut. Raelle rolled onto her back beside Scylla, her chest heaving just like Scylla's. The blonde let out a breezy laugh as she ran her tongue over her lips and tasted Scylla there. Raelle was a giver and always had been. Giving pleasure to someone else was just as good as receiving it herself. Beside her, Scylla hummed her appreciation. "Fuck, you're good at that," she gasped. Her body felt like a lead weight, but her mind was floating. Raelle turned onto her side, propping her head up on her elbow with a smug grin. "There's a lot of things I'm good at." It was dark when Scylla arrived back home. She'd spent a whole afternoon at Raelle's place. Scylla had been hesitant about suggesting her plan to the other girl, but by the time she'd walked through the front door that night, she was thoroughly pleased she did. "Hey, Syl," Anacostia greeted her as she walked into the kitchen. Her adoptive mother was dressed in civilian clothes for a change, and busy seeing to dinner. "Did you get everything you needed done at Collar's house?" Scylla ducked her head as she felt a blush spread over her cheeks. "Yeah, we finished the project," she said, busying herself with getting a can of soda from the fridge to hide her embarrassment. "Is Porter still here?" she asked, noticing Anacostia had set 4 plates on the counter. "Yeah, he and Byron are upstairs. Can you let them know dinner will be ready in 10? "Sure," said Scylla. She slipped out of the kitchen with her soda and headed upstairs. She went straight to her room first and into the ensuite that connected her and Byron's rooms. Scylla set the shower running. She'd come more times than she could count today, and her sticky thighs bore the evidence of it. She needed to wash up if she was going to make it through dinner with her family. She let the water run to warm up while she went to tell Byron and Porter dinner wouldn't be long. "Byron, dinner—" Scylla trailed off at the sight before her. Porter, shirtless and on top of her twin brother. The two of them were lying in Byron's bed, making out in much the same way as Scylla and Raelle had been doing not so long ago. "Byron, what the fuck?" she snapped at her brother, making both boys jump. Porter rolled to the side, grabbing at his shirt and pulling it over his head with a self-conscious smile. "Hey, Syl." Byron wasn't so genial. He scowled at his twin, pissed at her untimely interruption. "Ever heard of knocking?" "Lock your door if you're doing that shit." "I did." Byron gestured at his bedroom door. "Then lock both, dumbass. Jeez." Scylla shook her head at the two boys. She loved them more than life itself. But 5 minutes later, and she would have walked in on a lot more. She didn't need to see her twin brother and her childhood best friend doing that. "Did you get your project finished?" Porter asked, trying to stop a row from breaking out between the twins. He'd been playing peacemaker between the two of them for as long as he could remember. "Is she still alive?" Byron smirked. "She's peachy," Scylla huffed as she perched herself on Byron's desk. "She's cute," grinned Porter. Scylla rolled her eyes at the pair of them. She'd like to think she wasn't so see-through, but Porter was like a brother to her, a third twin who could read Scylla and her moods as easily as Byron could. "She's an annoying jock," Scylla huffed. "Just like you." Byron threw a protective arm around the other boy. "Hey, Porter is perfect." He pressed a kiss to Porter's cheek, something he couldn't do outside their house. "You guys are so cringe." "You're just jealous." Byron poked his tongue out at her like they were still 5. "I'm really not," said Scylla, letting out a heavy sigh. "I pretend to be his girlfriend all week. That's more than enough for me." Byron's expression softened, his annoyance fading. He reached for Porter's hand and squeezed it tight. "We appreciate what you do for us, Syl. We really do." "Yeah. My parents would kill me if they knew I was gay," said Porter, his chin tucked to his chest and his eyes glassy and fixed on his and Byron's joined hands. "I would do anything for you, Porter. Your family," said Scylla, and she meant it. "You deserve to be happy too, Syl." "I think I could do better than Raelle Collar, thanks." Scylla shot her brother a fake smile. "Besides, we graduate this year. I can worry about me when we're all in college, and you and Porter can go on double dates with me." "Who said anything about dating?" Byron scoffed. What you need is a good fuck. You need to unwind, sis. Scylla bit the inside of her cheek and tried to ignore the stickiness between her thighs. Byron had cut a little close to the bone there. Scylla dismissed him with a wave of her hand. Whatever. Kostya wanted me to tell you guys dinner will be ready soon. I'm going to grab a shower beforehand. Didn't you go in this morning? Asked Byron. What are you, the shower police? Scylla stalked out of the room, slamming the bathroom door behind her. The lock snapped into place with a click. What's up with her? Porter frowned. Byron lay back down with a shake of his head, pulling Porter along with him with an exaggerated sigh. Like I said, she needs to get laid. Please find the fanfiction you just listened to on Archive of Our Own and leave the author some love. Without them, this wouldn't be possible, and we want to thank them from the bottoms of our hearts for creating these amazing stories and keeping the show alive.